Hi, I'm Avi Feingold. I'm the co-host of Bonjour Chai on the CJN Podcast Network and a contributing editor for the CJN magazine. Bonjour Chai is Canada's weekly Jewish discussion and debate podcast. We discuss the issues that are important to Jewish Canadians. The stereotype of Canadians is that we either all agree with each other or we disagree and we don't want to talk about it and we don't fight and we don't argue. We do our thing quietly and off to the side. And it's not always true. I like to think that Canadian Jews have strong disagreements, but that are respectful about it. I think historically that has been the case. And hearing two people disagree in a loving, friendly, idea-based sort of way, hopefully is a model for other people to have these conversations themselves. And I think it's important for people to be able to hear these things. We can't do this without your support. Your donation goes a long way to helping us bring you the stories that you want to hear. Please visit thecjn.ca/donate. And if you're Canadian, you can even get a tax receipt.
So then, I ended up putting on this inflatable dinosaur costume and being addressed as Rabbi Rex for like 5 minutes.
That's the voice of David Gellis, a Toronto lawyer and grandson of a Holocaust survivor who's just weeks away from completing his conversion to Judaism. It's a journey that's taken the 36-year-old from his Venezuelan home to joining the Introduction to Jewish Life conversion classes at Toronto's Holy Blossom Temple. Gellis has learned about Shabbat, about the commandments, about keeping kosher, but it's mainly that he's drawn to be part of the community, and more so especially after October 7th, with anti-Semitism at levels not seen since his Jewish grandfather fled Austria in the 40s to South America. But Gellis said there was nothing in any of his course books that prepared him when his rabbi asked him to dress up as a dinosaur to entertain the Hebrew school kids, a request he good-naturedly accepted as part of the deal, just as, since October 7th, part of his conversion work is learning how to handle anti-Semitism. Gellis is one of dozens, perhaps hundreds of Canadians who've been flocking to Jewish conversion courses recently. Canadian rabbis of all denominations are reporting a heightened level of interest from people inquiring about converting. Reform rabbis in Toronto say they're having to cap the cohorts, there are waiting lists, and there are similar trends being seen in Vancouver, in Calgary, and in Montreal. And some Conservative and Orthodox rabbis I spoke to have said the same thing. While some of the converts were either already partnered with a Jewish spouse and wanted to take the next step, many converted solo for their own personal reasons. And October 7th had a lot to do with it.
When October 7th happened, and we saw almost immediately the explosion in anti-Semitism and anti-Israel, protests and social media posts and all that, I think I felt something in me that maybe I just felt, this is maybe what my Jewish ancestors felt when they were living through the Nazi times in Austria and Vienna. And I just kind of felt like that generational trauma flare up. And I just kind of had this feeling that this isn't just another flare up in the conflict. This is something else. And that made it more important to me to take the next steps.
I'm Ellin Bessner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Monday, December 9th, 2024. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, and made possible in part thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation.
There's not that many news outlets that are covering Canadian Jewish arts these days, so we're really doing something unique. Hi, I'm Ilana Zakon.
And I'm David Sklar.
And we're the hosts of Culturally Jewish.
In these times right now of growing anti-Semitism, I think a lot of Jewish artists are feeling very isolated from their own arts communities.
It's very isolating being in the arts world in Canada, and we get a chance to meet people from all over the country who are dealing with it in all sorts of different ways.
It also makes me feel more proud to be a Jewish artist right now. We would say there's no one out there who understands what we're going through, who feels the way we feel. Are we going crazy, right? Or is the world going crazy? And when we get together and we chat with these artists, we say we are not alone, that there are other people who are going through the same thing. And it actually makes me more proud to be a Jew and a Jewish artist.
To support our work and to keep up to date on everything that's happening at the Canadian Jewish News, visit thecjn.ca/donate.
It's not clear exactly how many people have converted across Canada, as each Reform synagogue keeps its own statistics, but here are some figures from Toronto's Holy Blossom Temple's conversion course that started this fall. They have 60 students. That's nearly double the intake of 34 students from February's course and the highest in years. It's not free. Courses cost $800 plus other fees. It takes about a year. There are also the formal rabbinical court or Beit Din, the immersion in the mikveh or the ritual bath, the final exams, and in the case of males, a ceremonial drawing of blood or even a full circumcision. Now, on today's episode, we're honored to introduce you to 3 new or about to be members of the Jewish people. David Gellis and 2 women from west of Toronto. Julie Moreau converted last year. She's a behavioral analyst in Oakville, married with 4 children, and Gracia Mboko of Burlington, a former women's tennis champion who's now an entrepreneur working in the financial world. She was born into a Catholic family in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Gracia, Julie, and David joined to share their conversion stories.
Thank you for having us, Ellin.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Ellin. It's great to be here.
So I guess you guys don't know each other, but you're all kind of here because you're converting to Judaism. Who's the closest and who's the newest? Like, figure out who's where.
I converted back in the spring, so in May.
Yeah, I was I bet din in late October, my mikvah and November 1st.
So where did you both do your mikvahs?
In Thornhill.
So that's the most recent. Where do you fit in, David?
I have like 3 weeks to go in the course and then Beit Din and mikveh.
Okay.
So exciting.
It's very exciting.
We need to know your stories. If you would honor us with how you decided to do this. Julie, yours is a 30-year-old exposure, I guess you called it. Do you want to share what made you decide 30 years later to go ahead with it?
I graduated high school. I did a ballet dance program, English immersion program. So I came here by myself and I was kind of alone. So I moved in NDG area, Côte St. Luc, Queen Mary, and here were my friends, my new family, and my friends became my family, and they invited me over for Shabbat, for some high holidays, and I guess then I didn't really know I was enough to say, yes, I want to convert, or I don't want to convert, but I started praying and reading, and it was a very spiritual journey then for me. And still to this day, it doesn't register to me where you're from, your country. Here in Toronto, everybody has an accent. Everybody's from somewhere else, and we're all home. So who I was gonna marry was nothing to do with religion. And I don't want to get why closer to October 7th, but I think it was just for me a return home, return to who I am. Some call it neshama, or some call it, I think it was there all along, but it was more awakened in the last couple of months for sure.
You talked about October 7th, about how your decision has been impacted by the year of October 7, 2023.
Myself, I had started to read a couple books back before. I was in Chicago running Chicago Marathon October 8th. So I really didn't have a clue of what happened after I finished the marathon, and I saw all these flags and garbage can lit up on fire and people marching and chanting, and I was shocked. I couldn't walk, first of all, because I had just ran 40-some kilometers. And I came back and it was just surreal. It took me a week or two before I got in touch with Rabbi Wise and trying to see how I can join and come home in a certain way, I guess. But I was in shock.
Okay, so we'll bring it to your partner next to you. I want to hear how you decided this was what you wanted to do and when you started thinking about maybe being Jewish.
Yeah, I would say my journey, it feels like a lifelong journey. I Growing up, my parents weren't very religious, although we were raised in a Catholic environment just due to better education resources, like growing up as children. But my dad never baptized my siblings and I, wanting us to have the choice to follow the religions that we please when that time did come. I feel like my upbringing, I've always found myself, with a lot of Jewish friends growing up, whether that was through my sport or traveling, always, found myself in the Jewish communities. So I always had exposure to, the religions and the culture, and just through friends who maybe were not religious themselves, but shared, history with Israel. And I would say the trigger for my conversion was when my grandpa passed away a couple of years ago, and we got to go back to Africa for the first time, and just learning about, family history and culture. I think that really was the catalyst to drive my decision to, take the conversion seriously, reach out to Rabbi Wise, and fully commit to the journey, which was the best decision of my life.
Why was going back to your grandpa's funeral have anything to do with Judaism?
Well, when you experience death in your family, you're never really prepared for it. But I think it was observing just the impact it had on both my mom's side of the family and my dad's side of the family. It brought us back to our roots in Africa, where, funny enough, in one of the little villages, there was a little Chabad center and home in the neighborhood. So I always look for signs whenever I'm conflicted with decisions, and even just hearing stories of my grandma talk about, her upbringing and, her story, or even how she raised my father and, that whole side of the family. I just saw so many parallels and similarities. And for me, I took that as a sign to kind of pursue it further. And when I actually had my first call with Rabbi Wise, I was on my way to Belgium. And funny enough, I was sitting beside two Orthodox Jewish women on my flight to Belgium. So I felt that was another sign many months later. So there were just always reassuring, signs from God that this was the path I needed to stay on.
Is anyone else in your extended family or close family also turning Jewish or interested in this? Or you are both of you, Julie and Gracia, are you the only ones?
My youngest daughter did the youth group. She went to Camp George. She's very interested. Also, I was brought up Catholic, not practicing, but because it was what was expected to do. I was a CNE, as we call here, Christmas and Easter. I was brought up in fear of disappointing, upsetting God. So it was not the positive experience for me. And my daughter had the same experience as well. My family is very interested in what I'm doing, and they're very supportive, and they ask questions.
I would say I kind of tiptoed my way into letting my family know, but it's been supportive for the most part. There's been a lot of questions, but my siblings have been fully supportive, so have my aunts and uncles. My parents, it took a while to get them warmed up, but my dad, I would say, has really been supportive behind it, and he feels like a change within me since this journey. So yeah, it's been good for the most part.
All right. And David is here, since you're the newbie here.
Yes. Part of the reason why I guess I'm from Venezuela is because my dad's dad was an Austrian Jew who escaped the Nazis and ended up in Venezuela. So he passed before I was born, so I never got a chance to meet him, but I always knew that I had Jewish ancestry, and it was always something that my dad and I were really interested in and wanted to find out more about. He wasn't raised Jewish. He was raised kind of just secularly, and I was technically raised Catholic, but just secularly, just because I guess in Venezuela it's kind of a Catholic majority country, and it's just kind of like part of the culture more so than being observant. And then growing up, like I said, I was always aware of that, but I always thought of Judaism as just a religion. And since I considered myself like a secular person, I wasn't sure if I wanted to, practice a religion. So it wasn't until like maybe a few years ago, like 6 years ago, that I started to realize that it's a lot more than a religion. And then I started reading more about Israel and about Judaism, what it means to be Jewish. And then it was only when I was like, okay, there's like, it's a people, like we're a people. And I wanted to reestablish that connection and, find my way back to the tribe.
That's an amazing story. So I just understood. Your grandfather was Jewish.
Yes.
Your grandmother was or was not?
Was not.
Was not. We better talk about this because it's so complicated in the Jewish faith. As you know, converting, they ask you, which the mother, the father, some accept it, some don't. Does that bother you guys at all that there's these sort of rules and categories?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Since I wasn't brought up Jewish and didn't really know anything about what it means to be Jewish, I didn't think it was like unfair, for example, that I wouldn't be considered Jewish, because like I think it would be disingenuous if I was considered Jewish. But who knows? Like I have a friend who converted and his dad is Jewish and he was raised Jewish, but he still had to convert because it was patrilineal, and he has many opinions about that.
Yep. Some people would not think that's fair at all. And
funnily enough, part of my journey was my sister married a Jewish guy years ago. And they live in Vancouver. So I was visiting them in Vancouver and we went to his family's for Shabbat. And it was my first Shabbat dinner. And there was just something about it that made me feel like, this was kind of here all along. But now that I've experienced it, it was kind of like this clicking moment in my head where I was like, oh, okay, this is it. And funnily enough, she's not converting, at least yet. So it's kind of funny that I am, but she's married and she's not.
Are you converting for you, or is there also someone special that you're converting for?
It's for me. It's an important part of who I am and my identity.
What has your family's reaction been? I know you mentioned some, Julie. There's been some support. I wondered if anyone else would like to share.
A lot of questions, though, especially with just like what, probed my decision, or, what am I learning about? And I think there's a lot of, and this may not be like from my direct family members, but just with everything that you see, in the news and the media, there's a lot of like political questioning as well. But
right, let's talk about that anti-Semitism and what's going on in the world. When I asked another rabbi if he's seeing conversion and why, he's saying yes. And I said, why are they doing it? And he said, because they're masochists. And then he started laughing. But in all seriousness, a lot of people would say, why would you want to be Jewish when the whole world hates Jews now?
I have always, I guess, experienced life as a minority, being, a Black woman. So it's not anything that I'm new to, I would say. Like I've always been raised to, be wary of people not liking me for my skin color, my beliefs. I've always been, like the one Black girl at a tennis club or the one Black person in a school. So I always felt like a minority growing up. So the decision to convert and be Jewish and support Israel, I was not shy to having to stand up to adversity. And if anything, having the faith be the driver, I felt more empowered in that decision. And especially with October 7th, like seeing the community come together, seeing the people, find their home again within Judaism, it was just so empowering, despite, like the atrocities happening all over the world. But it was great to see everybody be stronger in their Jewishness.
For me, it would be more like, why not live for something I defend and feel and breathe than die? I'd rather live for it. I chose a profession where I'm the voice of my clients, students, patients. I wanted to be my own voice, and I felt now, because I didn't want to look compliant with what's going on in this world. I feel like one single person can make that difference. Maybe there is something I will say to someone and it will resonate with them. it's a good time to join and say, hey, we're all here, and it's not fair for anyone, but it's not fair again. That's how I feel.
Have you experienced have you gone to rallies or have you done any sort of public stuff where people see that you're there and they are anti-Semitic towards you or shouted at you? Or
I've had a few friends from high school, just with stuff that I've reshared on social media, kind of express their thoughts in a very aggressive way. But I do feel that, through everything that went on, we were armed with the right ways to handle those conversations. So I did feel very prepared to inform people with, facts, as opposed to a lot of the propaganda that you do see across social media. And I think anyone who does know me knows that, I always lead with kindness and love for others. So it led to a lot of very interesting conversations, but also new perspectives learned politically that I will admit, I have never been someone who has been political or knew anything about history before. So, I would say in social media, but never in person. And I do wear Magen David every day, and I travel a lot. I'm on a plane usually every other week. And I've never had any sort of violence towards me in person. It's more so behind a screen, I would say. Is
David, you're joining at a time, it's a year and a bit since October 7th. How has that impacted how the journey has been for you?
Yeah, I guess when October 7th happened and we saw almost immediately the explosion in anti-Semitism and anti-Israel, protests and social media posts and all that, I think it was just after October 7th when I started reaching out to shuls and rabbis and seeing what the process is and how I can make this, a real thing and take that plunge.
You're doing this a bit for your grandfather's family who didn't make it in the Holocaust.
Everybody died except him and his sister. I've always been cognizant of that history, and my dad and I have tried to do a little family research, and I guess that's the conclusion is everybody died.
So, David, how old are you now?
I'm 36.
Right. Do you get to have a bar mitzvah now?
Yes, and
Do you want one?
I'd like one. Yeah, I'm gonna do one.
What about you two? Are you allowed to have bar mitzvahs, and you want one?
Yes, I'm actually planning next spring. So I will be getting ready to study a Parsha and do everything. What about you?
I feel like my daughter was supposed to do it, and then she ran into difficult times in school, and she lived through the antisemitism and the hatred in high school. And so I want her to do it before if she still wants to, and then I'll do it or we'll do it together. I just want to give her the time and space and not do it before her, just in case she'll want to do it.
Your daughter's experienced anti-Semitism since October 7th or before this?
Since she's changed school, so this year. So she came back from Camp George. She was high to the top, so hyped on making new friends. It was the best time of her life. She wants to go full summer next year. She wanted to do her bat mitzvah. She enrolled in the youth program, and then kids started to talk and saying things like Israel is not for real, Palestine this, and she says, Mom, I can't deal with this anymore, and I don't know who to turn to. And so she shut herself down, and we just give her time and space. She comes once in a while, but she's just reflecting. She got scared. Yeah. She's in grade 9. She's 14. Right. She still wants to. She loves this experience, and she was doing her cash route more than anybody else, and she was telling me on things, and she learned everything so quickly, and then she just froze there.
And I guess, is there anything you each want to ask each other about this? Because you haven't met before. The two of you have met, but you haven't met David.
I would say, who do you think you can share this with? That's either your partner, your family, but Who's your shadow? Who's your quiet person knowing all your steps and supports you? And how do you think you will make Shalom Bayit like a home that's Jewish with everything else? Like, it's hard when you're alone, even when you have people around and they support you. You have to be the one that's putting it into place, and so you need to really be convinced and confident. I find it's easier when there's a group of people doing it all at the same time in the same home. That's my personal journey anyways.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. Luckily, I have a lot of good friends who I've met during this journey who I've had a lot of like great formative Jewish experiences with. So I don't feel like I'm going through it alone, even though I guess technically in my house, it's just me and my cat.
Yeah, I would say on my end, because I am the only one in my family who did convert, but I do try, like I'm living with my parents currently, like I moved out of my condo in Toronto, and just little things that you can share together. Like my little sister, I tell her everything, and she's kind of like my cheerleader in the background. And then my mom and I make challah every week, and it's kind of inspired her to start like baking as well, like at home. So we don't buy like store-bought bread. Like she'll make bread every week and we make challah together. And that's just something that's, bringing a little bit of Jewish traditions into the household. And then I find like shul, I feel like there's a whole community here that I'm always so excited to see every Saturday. And I feel like it's all around you. It's part of, the community. And I would say that's what's made me feel like I'm not alone, like being actively involved as much as I can.
So what happens next? What's on the calendar for you? You have an appointment in 3 weeks, David, with the Beit Din?
Probably in January.
Oh, in January. Do you have to study? Like, what if you fail? Is it like an exam? I don't even know how it works.
I'm ready though.
Okay, well, you went through it, both of you. What advice do you have for him?
We had an exam, so through the Jewish information course, we had an end of year exam, an essay that we then presented to the Beit Din. I really enjoyed it. You just tell your story, you explain what your journey was like through the course. Just be yourself, like follow, the calling that you had. And I felt like it was very personal to, at least from others in my class as well, it was very personal to each of our experiences. And I would say the mikvah was like so spiritual, so there's no word to describe it. It was such a unique experience, and yeah, very spiritual. I felt more connected and at peace, and it was an out-of-body experience.
The mikvah was spiritual, but I kept on coming up, so I made a lot of bubbles and I choked but it was so spiritual. It was just a milestone that stayed with me. I made this whole day, like I had my husband, one of my daughter, and I went and we ate kosher, went to the grocery, got some things to make one day very memorable and just go from now on. So, yeah.
I don't think our listeners realize that it's not like a whim. Like you actually have to make a financial and a time commitment and a life commitment. And not everyone goes through with it at the end. I'm sure some people in your course said, no, I'm not ready, or it's not for me, right? Is that a thing?
Yeah, there's a couple of people I know that didn't go through.
It's a year commitment and then Rabbi Wise said, would like to see you at least twice for Shabbat. And I went to the morning minyan.
Like per month?
Yes.
Yeah. You probably go more than most people.
Yeah, and I ended up going more because I went to the morning minyan in Solel and I loved it, and it was something different. It's actually where I picked up most of the Hebrew for the prayers and the services. And so you make it work the way you can.
And it's also something that it doesn't feel like work. Like for me, it's like I had, a full work day, and I was so excited for my Thursday nights to, dive into the course materials. And we always had, a rabbi joining the class to teach us about, the topic of the day. And that was a 3-hour commitment on Thursday nights after, working 8-9 hours during the day and then 3 more hours on Zoom. But it was something I really enjoyed doing, and I looked forward to it. And even, Shabbats is something that I look forward to every week. It's so grounding. And
yeah, I've been more to shul than the church in my life at my age.
Same.
Yeah.
What's one funny thing that's happened to you guys as you're going through this?
Like one funny thing from
this whole conversion thing, yeah.
I'm not going to say that there aren't any funny moments or like moments of joy, because I have to say, even living through this really dark time, I feel like finding my way back to the tribe and making all these new Jewish friends and going to shul and all that has been like this huge source of joy. And I feel like I'm happier in life despite everything that's going on. But yeah, in terms of like specific funny moments, I thought of one. So last month, I was just hanging out at shul, and Rabbi Bereshel asked me if I could come volunteer for Tot Shabbat, which is like the Shabbat service for kids and their families. And I was like, sure, I'll show up. And then I'm just working the next day, and she texts me, hey, by the way, how do you feel about putting on an inflatable dinosaur costume? And I'm just like, you know what? Why not? In for a penny, in for a pound, right?
That's not in the syllabus. I have to. It's not in your course outline. It's not.
It's not. And then some of the kids were insisting that I wasn't a real dinosaur, which was pretty hurtful. But you just gotta let them say these things.
That's a great story.
And that was hilarious. And then I got like
Rabbi Rex
serve them some pizza after and have some pizza myself. So win-win,
You can't top that. I think we need to stop right there. Well, I'm so glad you shared the story and met each other, and I wish you all the best, and thank you again for being on the CJN Daily.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. It was a pleasure.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily. The podcast is made possible in part through the generous support of Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin's Charitable Foundation. Our show is produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman. Our executive producer is Michael Freeman, and the music is by Dov Beck-Levine. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode or share your own conversion journeys. Please write to us at info@thecjn.ca. Thanks for listening.
I recently wrote a story about the editorial landscape of campus newspapers, how many student newspapers throughout the country are rejecting pro-Israel perspectives. It also focuses on what students are doing about it. This was an important story that I think highlights the cultural war that's taking place on campuses right now as students continue to adopt an anti-Israel and, in some cases, anti-Jewish perspective. My career as a journalist actually started at a student newspaper years ago, so this was a full circle moment that's allowed me to revisit my roots and see how much has changed in a post-October 7th world. My name is Mitchell Konski. I cover campus life and education for the Canadian Jewish News. If you want to support this work and everything else that we do at the CJN, please visit thecjn.ca/donate. And if you're Canadian, you can also get a tax receipt.